afternoon. Originally from Augusta, Kansas, Allana Parker received a Bachelor of Science in History, along with a minor in Leadership Studies from Kansas State University, and a Master of Arts in Museum Studies from the University of Kansas. She has served as Curator of Design with the Riley County Historical Museum since 2012, as well as a member of the Board of Directors from the Manhattan-Riley County Preservation Alliance. Please welcome Allana Parker.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you very much for letting me come share a little bit about Riley County history with you. It's one of my favorite things to do. I'm very thankful to have a job that I love what I do. We have some great history here in Riley County. If my throat gets a little sore, I apologize. I gave a Cold War presentation to 350 ninth graders yesterday. It was a lot of fun, very long day. So what I wanted to share with you today, if anybody is familiar with the Strong family of Riley County. And if you can't see the screen, hopefully you can see them okay. Some of my images are probably a little smaller, so I apologize for that in advance. So to kind of set the stage, we're talking about the time period of 1854 in Kansas, territorial Kansas. Henry Strong, born on December 23rd, 1831 in Connecticut, made his first trip to Kansas in 1855. He was a dedicated abolitionist and came out with the New England Immigrant Aid Company. He was hired as a freighter and drove teams of oxen from Leavenworth, Kansas to Denver, Colorado, and then on to Santa Fe, New Mexico. After passing through Manhattan, which was still known as New Boston at that time, little trivia, before it was Manhattan, it was actually called New Boston, Henry saw agricultural opportunity in the rich bottomland of the Blue River. He would later return to the area to settle and start a family. So it's hard to imagine, this is what Poyntz Avenue looked like in the 1860s. In 1857, Henry became a member of the First Congregational Church of Manhattan and boarded with a local family. He shortly after returned to Connecticut the following year to marry Eleanor Strong. She was his second cousin and childhood friend. A few days following the wedding, the Strongs left for Kansas Territory to establish a permanent home in Manhattan. If anybody is familiar with Isaac Goodnow of Manhattan, one of the original founders of the college that became Kansas State University, and of one of the original founders of Manhattan, Henry Strong and Isaac Goodnow, they were actually cousins. So very small world. So here you see, we actually only have one known photograph of Henry. It's not very good quality, but that is him there and his wife, Eleanor. So upon their arrival to Manhattan, Kansas, Henry constructed a cabin at the foot of Bluemont Hill, which of course is the hill that has the Manhattan letters on it. It's often referred to as Manhattan Hill. The true name is Bluemont Hill, so that is where he first built his cabin. He continued to work as a freighter, and Eleanor conducted school classes in the home, becoming one of Manhattan area's first teachers. In March 1860, the Strongs purchased 143 acres that included the cabin, stone barn, corn crib, and other smaller outbuildings for $500. Generations of Strongs would establish their families and livelihoods on this land. Over the next several years, however, the Strongs faced severe hardships, including financial setbacks and family tragedy. In 1860, Eleanor gave birth to their first child, Freddie Robinson Strong, in Henry's absence. Freddie died of cholera just 9 short months later. Their second child, Grace, was born in 1862. So in the winter of 1867, the Strong family faced additional misfortune when a fire consumed their wood frame home and possessions. And that is the cabin that you see in the photograph there at the foot of Bluemont Hill. Following the accident, the Strongs stayed with a neighbor for many months until Henry constructed a new 2-story limestone home. This was built with stone from the Strong quarry. The Strongs took residence in this home, which is located at 1916 Beck Street. This house is still standing, and the interesting part about this, the great-great-great-great-granddaughter has actually repurchased the home back into the family, so it is now known as the Strong Inn. So in this photograph here, this is an 1881 plat map sketch of that Strong farm. And here again there's the plat map, the 1881 Riley County plat map. You can see where that farm was located. And a little closer here, so Henry and Eleanor, they were involved in several activities here in Kansas. One of those was they did have one of the largest apple orchards in Kansas, and this was during the 1880s. You can see that apple orchard is illustrated on that 1881 plat map there. And its current location. So if anybody's driven by Casement or the next time you go around there, take a left on Beck Street and you'll see that house that stands out pretty clearly. Again, Henry was away on a freighting trip, leaving Eleanor to manage the farm and care for their young child. Farm life remained challenging for the Strongs as they faced devastating drought and in 1874 a locust infestation that decimated their crops. Despite this adversity, however, the Strongs remained on their farm and continued to work for a better life. Family oral history also maintains that as ardent abolitionists here in Manhattan, Henry and Eleanor actively participated in the Underground Railroad. So this was prior, during, and just after the Civil War. So due to the danger that this presented for the couple, Henry dug a small cave into an embankment along the brush-filled ravine of the property near the river. He would conceal slaves during the day, and once night approached, Henry and Eleanor carefully made their way to the cave with food and water, and then guided the freedom seekers to their next conductor to lead them north to Nebraska. The Strongs also had a third child, and his name was Clayton, born in '64, and this was in Connecticut. Eleanor would go back. Of course, Henry is leaving her by herself quite a bit of the time, so she went back to Connecticut to have her child. The Strongs also had 3 more children, Evangeline, Ferry, and Emery. Emery died, he was only 6 years old from a farm accident, and then their other daughter, Evangeline, she was only 23 years old when she passed away. This was from an apparent suicide. So you can see this family absolutely faced some hardships. These original pioneers, it's hard to imagine what they went through when they came here to Kansas at this time. So this is an etching here of that Strong house, and very similar to how it looks today. I also wanted to share a few other photographs that we have. As I mentioned, the great-great-great-granddaughter, she was kind enough to loan family artifacts for an exhibit at the museum and photographs that we used for that and this presentation. This is Eleanor Strong and her horse Dandy. She was very proud of her horse. And this is out of Manhattan Street. We've been trying to identify the house in the background. I believe we might have it narrowed down. So if anybody recognizes that home, please let us know. So I do want to back up a little bit. I did talk a little bit about Evangeline. Evangeline was attending Kansas State Agricultural College, and while she was there, she met a man named Frederick Baxter. Frederick Baxter was a civil engineering student, and eventually he was a boarder at the Strong family home. And they often took in boarders too for additional income. We do have Henry's ledger where he writes about stranger number 1 stayed with us, or stranger number 2 stayed with us. So the two eventually married, and as a civil engineer, Fred Baxter, he went out to Cripple Creek, Colorado, and this is shortly after Evangeline had her second daughter. They had 2 children together. So while he is back in Cripple Creek, Colorado, they cannot find Evangeline. So this daughter she was 6 months old. They did have a family friend that, well, it was her childhood friend, and you can see the ledgers from school that they went to together. They were always paired together. His name was Ed Knox. So they're trying to find Evangeline, and they're not sure where she is. And as her childhood friend, he went to their favorite spot in that apple orchard. And very sadly, he found her, she had hung herself in that orchard right there on the Strong farm. So as I mentioned, this family faced some tragedy. So despite that, Eleanora, so as I mentioned, they had, Evangeline had those 2 children, Eleanora and Henry. He was 60 years old. He adopted Mabel, that little girl. They did also report this incident. They did report this in the Manhattan newspapers at that time. Of course, they wouldn't go into a lot of elaboration, but they did assume that it was postpartum depression for Evangeline. So as I mentioned, Eleanora, at at 60 years old, taking care of her 2 grandchildren. So this is Mabel, the little girl that you see in the photograph, and her brother, Emery. And you can still see there is the strong family plot in Sunset Cemetery. When you go in, if you head straight to the left, you can see all the strong family members there in Sunset Cemetery. And as I mentioned, we only have the one photograph of Henry. This is that one photograph that you see. He's there in the background. As I mentioned, we do have Henry's ledger. We can see some of the different activities that he was involved in Manhattan. He was also very active with his limestone quarry. If you know where Vista is today, that is around the area, or the Vista Burger restaurant